I think it's possible that AI is both completely underhyped and we're completely underestimating the impact it will have. And it's also, in other ways, overhyped. I think because the activation energy to creating software is so much lower, there's going to be a lot of software created that never would have made sense to create before. Over the last 6 months, have started thinking of myself more as an engineering manager who is managing a team of 1 to 4 AI software developers at a time. It can go for like 4 minutes and then come back with something that looks like a fully featured CRM. And it's astonishing. And then you're like, well, man, if it could do this in 5 minutes, it could build the whole thing in a couple hours. And then I don't need to spend thousands of dollars a month on Salesforce or whatever. Just because it can get you 80% of the way in 5 minutes doesn't mean that it's capable of getting the other 20% of the way in an hour, right?
This episode is brought to you by Impekable, your go-to partner for designing and building software in the age of AI. Just like today's conversation explores how AI is becoming the new power tool for developers, Impekable helps companies put those tools to work, from proof of concepts and pilots to production-ready apps. Whether you're building on Twilio, Google Cloud, or 11 Labs, our team makes sure you're not just experimenting, but shipping. Learn more at impekable.com. Now, let's dive into today's conversation with Greg Baugues.
In this video, we have an expert DevRel for AI companies, and we'll be talking about the reality of AI as it pertains to developers and developer productivity engineering, and also some of the best tips from someone who is hands-on with a variety of agentic coding development tools. Welcome to the show, Greg Baugues, my dear friend, ex-Twilio and professional DevRel for AI Labs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And for folks who are unfamiliar with that term, the DevRel, because it's a bit of a weird job. So my background is I'm a software developer. I've been coding my whole life. And then I spent 9 years working for this company called Twilio, which made tools for software developers. And there I worked in the marketing department doing developer education and developer awareness. And I left there a couple of years ago, and I was leaving right as the time ChatGPT came out. And one of the most amazing applications for all this new AI stuff that's come around is helping developers write code. And I spent the last 2 years building lots of software with these tools, learning what they're good at, learning what they're not good at, and then helping AI companies with developer education and developer.
Thank you for that perspective. I take the terms for granted, and explaining what it even means is great.
I am a developer who reluctantly took a job in marketing so that I could talk to people a lot.
First of all, Eric Schmidt, ex-Google CEO, says AI is completely underhyped. And then there's a recent MIT study just said that 90% of AI projects just fail. We have all these, and of course, NVIDIA, Jensen's like, okay, there's AI is also underhyped, and everybody's saying, hey, all these layoffs are because of AI. On one hand, you have AI is taking everybody's jobs, and on the other hand, you're getting AI is completely useless and not helpful at all in terms of pushing initiatives or outcomes. And getting your perspective as it pertains to developer productivity, software engineering, I'd love to start with that for executives who are, I would call it AI curious. What is your take as someone on the ground playing with new AI development tools every day?
It is incredibly nuanced. It is possible that both of the perspectives are true, right? I think it's possible that AI is both completely underhyped and we're completely underestimating the impact it will have. And it's also, in other ways, overhyped. We're generalizing too much. There are specific areas where there will be incredible transformations. And then I think overall, people are ascribing sort of magical qualities to this stuff that don't exist. Sometimes it's easier to use an analogy outside of the realm of technologies. We recently became first-time homeowners. For the first time in my life, I have a little workshop. I bought power tools and I'm learning DIY stuff. I have DeWalt tools, like the yellow ones. I have a circular saw and a reciprocating saw. And then I also have this hand saw. And for me, a lot of the last year in that journey has been trying to learn, when is this the right tool for the job? What is the shape of problem that this specific tool is good at solving? And it is unquestionable that a circular saw is powerful. And if you had ever only owned a hand saw and someone gave you a circular saw, it's incredible productivity gains you could get from that. But it doesn't build the house for you. It didn't put general contractors out of business. An interesting analogy, and I'll speak mostly in specifics about software development, because when we generalize too much with the AI stuff, we lose the nuance. We need the nuance to be technically accurate. But in software development, it is a useful analogy to think that I've always thought of software development as more of a craft. And I didn't finish my college degree, and I've had a career in software development. I'm largely self-taught, which isn't really self-taught. It means I learn from friends, I learn from colleagues, and I learn from people on the internet, but more of an apprenticeship. And in the same way that you don't need a degree in chemistry to be a great chef or to be a great cook, I don't think you need a degree in computer science to be a great programmer. A lot more of it is about like, how do you ship stuff that works and do it on a consistent basis. From that perspective, we are moving from an era of software development of like software craftsmanship, where people generally are building software by hand, starting with a blank file, typing every keystroke on their own. And for the first time, we have power tools introduced into our world. There's a lot of hyperbole because there are some tasks that used to take 3 days that you can now do in 1 day or in 1 hour. And it's easy to extrapolate from that and say, okay, we're not going to need programmers anymore, or we can automate all the things. And once you start having that hyperbole, then it starts breaking down. There's still a whole lot more involved in software development than just these tasks that can be automated or just these tasks that can be sped up. We're just trying to figure all that stuff out. There's also incredible consequences that come from automating and speeding up these tasks. It's easy to ship a whole lot of bad code. You introduce a lot more technical debt. Often in software development, we find that writing the code is not actually the hard part. The hard part is understanding what the customer wants and building the right thing. And it's only after you have a firm understanding of that you should start writing the code. But there's all these different, very complex questions that when we start talking about what are the productivity gains you're going to get from AI, what will its impact on employment be? We need to figure out, when is AI the right tool for the job and what specific tasks is it making better?
I agree with that. And this analogy of when, if you have that, circular saw and you start looking for problems that a circular saw can solve, if you have this hammer of AI, sometimes I'll get calls with leads or companies interested in working with us. Okay, we're interested in AI. And my first question is, what do you want to solve? And it comes back to the problem, and is AI a good tool to solve with that? But in
Yeah.
terms of productivity gains for developers, just from your experience,
Yeah.
what sort of productivity gains do you feel like you personally have gotten from AI?
I'm going to use another analogy and I'll answer that question. My other analogy is we used to live in Brooklyn. We just recently moved out to the suburbs, bought a house. When we lived in Brooklyn, we have 2 kids. We bought an e-bike. And often when you live in a big city like New York, that last mile is very hard. You're not going to drive. Parking's tough. There's a lot of traffic. The train's good if you're going across the town, but how do you get from your house to the grocery store and back? How do you get the kids to school? How do you go to the parks? And we got a cargo e-bike. We could put the kids in and ride around. A lot of people, when they hear e-bike, they think when you get an e-bike, you're just going to do all the same things you did before. It's just going to be faster and easier. There's a bike for lazy people. That's not true. An e-bike, because the activation energy is so much lower, allows you to do things that you would never have even considered doing before. Now I can take the kids to the grocery store, pick up 4 bags of groceries and bring them all home at the same time, as opposed to one of us having to walk to the grocery store and carry all the bags back and not be able to manage a kid. We can now go to all the parks in the city, as opposed to just the parks that we can walk to. With the e-bike, ride deep into the park, whereas we wouldn't have done that before. And the same thing is true for the AI tools and coding. It's not just we're going to build all the same software that we did before. Now we can do it cheaper and with fewer developers, because the activation energy to creating software is so much lower. There's going to be a lot of software created that never would have made sense to create before. So in my personal experience, I'm so much more ambitious now about starting projects to scratch itches that I have that I before would have been a 3-month project and I only have room in my head for one project. And now let's see what Claude Code can do this afternoon. And so I've built a number of software tools for my own personal use over the last year that I never would have even attempted before, because I just knew that it would be way too ambitious. My daughter, she's 10, she has built games for herself. She has built Pomodoro timer, and she was using it to help her do her homework. And of course, we could buy an app or whatnot, but she was so much more likely to use a timer that she built herself that was tailored to
Wait, wait
exactly
a
her
minute.
needs.
Your young daughter, who is how old, is using the Pomodoro
10.
technique? That is insane.
I'm trying to share with her the things that I have learned.
Okay, I'm gonna like have focused time to crunch out productivity.
Whatever I can put in her toolbox to help her get through the homework. But yeah, it's from my perspective, what I'm seeing now is it changes every few months. The last few months, I've been using Claude Code. This is an agent that you run in the terminal. You have a conversation with it and you ask it to write software. It has access to the directory. It can write all the files. It can read all the files in the directory. It can run the code, see if it gets error messages, make changes based on the error messages. It's a large language model running in a loop across a code base. It can do stuff. And then I hook that up to GitHub. And now I can follow a similar software development practice of create an issue in the to-do list. Claude Code can read that in. It can work on it. It can run tests. I can report back. I can check it. And if it is working, I can then deploy it. This is now something that I can have working while I'm taking meetings or I'm, doing stuff with the kids or whatever throughout the day. So I can now also build software in interrupted blocks of time, as opposed to typically software development requires large blocks of uninterrupted time. And for me personally, it's allowed me just build a lot more software for a lot smaller projects than a lot smaller problems than what would have warranted me trying to write custom code.
I echo exactly what your experience. I have had a similar experience. I've built a bunch of small, they're not even apps, applets, maybe you would call them mini apps to solve my own problems as a busy founder, executive that I never would have had the time. Like you said, software development requires a lot of uninterrupted time. And then when you're a busy business sales led person where you have a lot of Zoom meetings and then 30 minutes here and there. You cannot code, but with agentic code development, I've built small things that add productivity to my life. As an example, data enrichment in terms of research for somebody books a call. Historically, if I don't know them or the company, I will research the person on LinkedIn and their company. Now, when somebody books a call, I have this AI automation that goes out and looks at that email that booked the calendar and researches, finds the person, finds the company on LinkedIn, get some basic research like revenue. I want to know if they can afford us. Are there any job postings? Because that kind of gives me insight. Oh, if they're hiring for this, they might be working on that. That's just one example, like an email finder tool. So, okay, this person spoke to me. I need to get their email. And I used to ask my EA, like, go hunt this email. And now there's a bot. I just ask, okay, Greg Baugues and then Twilio. That's all the inputs, and it'll go find the email. A lot of productivity tools that I never would have had the mind to overcome, like you said, the initial inertia to overcome if you had to start from scratch is just too much, and then it allows you to approach like maybe I can do this real quick because the barrier to entry is now low. Now, my next question is, given the rise of AI assisted code, website and application prompting tools like the
Yeah.
Lovables, the Replits, the Bolts of the world, and headlines, a non-technical business, do they need software engineers
Yeah.
to build applications? Is the hype real? Can I build a production app in Lovable and run with that to run my business? Can I replace Salesforce because I'm spending thousands of dollars on Salesforce?
Yeah.
Can I just say, hey, Replit or Lovable, build me a Salesforce clone with these features? I just use these features and get rid of that subscription. What is your take on that?
If there's an AI demo problem, let's say you go into ChatGPT. A lot of people have had this experience with ChatGPT. You ask it to write, I'll speak for myself. I ask it to write a poem about a subject and it spits back a poem. And I'm like, oh man, that poem's really good. That's great. And then I ask it to do something that I'm knowledgeable about. Let's speak for like 2 years ago when this technology first came out. I might ask it about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it gives some answers on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That kind of sounds right, but some of these details are a little bit off. It's not quite right. Then you ask it about another subject, and actually that's wrong. That's a pretty generic, basic understanding of it, but the details that matter there are wrong. Then what happens a lot of time with AI is that the initial impression is really good. And then once you dive into it, if you're a subject matter expert, you start finding issues where that an expert in the field wouldn't make, and that make a lot of difference. I'm seeing this right now. I'm using large language model for my fantasy football team. and I'm having it make all the decisions for me. I'm in a league with a bunch of other developers who are all doing the same thing. I'll have it write the report and the report at the end of the week, and the report sounds good, but some of the numbers are off. Right? And some of those details matter. And so I think the problem that a lot of people who need software are facing right now is that if you ask Lovable or you ask Replit to build you a demo of, let's say, a CRM, it can go for 4 minutes and then come back with something that looks like a fully featured CRM. And it's astonishing. And then you're like, man, if it could do this in 5 minutes, it could build the whole thing in a couple hours, and they don't need to spend thousands of dollars a month on Salesforce. Just because it can get you 80% of the way in 5 minutes doesn't mean that it's capable of getting the other 20% of the way in 1 hour. And it doesn't mean that it's capable of getting the rest of the way at all. And I'm not trying to speak here and to try to stay employed as a software developer. A lot of time, the devil is in the details. And so those details are often around things like payments, security, where small mistakes can truly destroy the business, right? And where the general website, the look and feel of it looks very convincing. But as you dig in, you start finding things. And so then you have to start asking yourselves questions. I think one thing that we find often in software development, a lot of people have this idea that they want to build an app and then have passive income for the rest of their life, right? You got to build it once and then you're good and people are going to buy the thing. You never have to touch it again. And I don't think any of us developers have ever had a project like that. One thing you learn in software development is the thing's never actually done. The entropy is real, either because systems change, computers change, security vulnerabilities are introduced, customer demands change, or payment stuff changes, regulations change, whatever it is. There's always things to fix or new features to roll out. And the most impressive part of any software project, AI or not, is always the beginning. It's always when you're going from 0 to 1, because you're starting with a blank file. You create a bunch of stuff. There's no complexity, no dependencies, there's no constraints. That's when you always feel the best. And that's why a lot of developers have, I'll speak for myself, have a whole bunch of unfinished projects, because it's always more fun to go start the next one than to finish the one you were working on, because the finishing part is the hardest part. And that's true for AI too. And so what folks need who are not familiar with this in software development, it's so easy to be deceived by how productive you can be in that first couple hours of building a new thing, and then not understand the complexity that like finishing the thing is the actual hard part. That remains true. So again, for small apps, building apps for yourself, building internal tools, building things where it's okay if the data is a little bit wrong or if it breaks, that stuff's awesome. Go nuts on that stuff. But if it's a customer facing, mission critical piece of software, you probably want to pay a premium to have something that's built and maintained by experts with a strong customer support team and an SLA behind it that has made guarantees about uptime and their ability to fix it when things go wrong.
That's really what you're paying for, not the 0 to 1 experience. I absolutely agree with you on that. It's echoed my own experience for non-technical executives who have an idea they think, or on entrepreneurs, non-technical entrepreneurs, they sometimes come with this notion of software being a product, being this fixed thing. They want a fixed quote of what's it going to take to build X. And in their mind, once X is done, they're going to have passive income forever and never have to put another dollar into this software. But if that were true, then Meta wouldn't have thousands of engineers, or Twilio, it's done, go away. Requirements change, compliance regulations change, other software companies that integrate with your software change over time, and you have to adapt. And then customers ask for new stuff all the time too. The reality is at the 0 to 1, my computer is littered with the abandoned project ideas that have a start, but then it got to somewhere. But the hard part is the last mile problem of finishing.
I don't want to pretend like those unfinished products are not helpful or deride them. When Midjourney first came out, it was an image generation AI. So you can now do this in ChatGPT. You ask it to create an image for you and you see it. Midjourney was one of the first popular ones. I was hanging out with our next door neighbor in Brooklyn, and he was a set designer for Broadway. We asked it to create a set for a Broadway production of Death of a Salesman in the style of Frank Lloyd Wright. 2 minutes later, we had an image here. He saw it and he just starts giggling. And to me, this was amazing. Like, it looked incredible. He was like, all right, first off, this would never work. There's too many things about this set design here that just are impractical for a Broadway production. He's like, that said, I have for my entire career employed junior designers and worked with them for weeks so that we could create mock-ups, so that we could go talk to a customer about what they want. Because it's so much easier to have a conversation about what people want when you have something you can see and point at and feel. And he's like, this mock-up is about on par with the quality of one of the mock-ups that I would previously spend like a week talking about. I think the same is true for software development projects, where I don't know if you want a CRM and you're a CEO, let's say, I don't know that you want to go to Lovable, build it there, and then have your business depend on it. But if you're going out to hire a consultancy, it might make a ton of sense for you to go into Lovable and spend a couple hours and to build a prototype of what you're looking for, and to be able to send that prototype to consultancies and say, this is what I want, but I want you to make it good and make it reliable. And so there's a ton of value in people who are not familiar with writing code being able to build stuff that looks good and works a little bit, even if it's never going to be fully reliable, to aid in the software development process, to make things better and to aid in communication and get everyone on the same page and to test stuff out. With software development, you often just don't know what you want till you start clicking around on things.
You said something earlier that one way I put it is AI looks impressive to the layperson who is not
Yeah.
a subject matter expert in that thing. Wow, it created this thing. And because you know Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, when you start reading it, it doesn't make any sense. Because it's trained on such general knowledge, it's the average of the internet, the average of all code bases it's trained on, including the worst developer and the mid level developer, that it doesn't pass the sniff test of a really good high level engineer.
That is generally true. With Claude Code, I am today able to produce better software than I am capable of producing on my own, and I'm able to do it faster. And I keep using these analogies. They're helpful for folks who don't write code for a living. Back to the power saw thing. I had so much fun building tables in my workshop, built a bench for my daughter, built a birdhouse, and oh my God, I'm so good at this. Like I watched some YouTube videos and I look at what I just built. This birdhouse is amazing. I can do all the things. We renovated our kitchen after we bought our house. We hired a general contractor. He came over on the first day with his two actual professionals. And I watched them use a circular saw, and I didn't touch mine for a year after that because
Yeah.
it was so demoralizing seeing how a professional could actually use the tools. For me, the sweet spot is these tools in the hands of a software developer, because the software developer has enough experience to have judgment about when you can automate things and when you can't, and when you're going into danger zones and when you're dealing with things that can be blasted through quickly. Software developers have a little bit better understanding about infrastructure requirements. Where are we going to deploy this? How are we going to authenticate into it? All these different things. What kind of logging do we need? The things that wouldn't be otherwise be obvious. I don't want to sit here and say, ride these tools for software development, because they are the most exciting thing that happened to my career as a software developer. I feel like I'm wearing the Iron Man suit now. I feel like Tony Stark, and I have this powered exoskeleton, and I'm still controlling the thing. It is not a Terminator. It's not an autonomous robot where I just tell it to go do the thing and it does it. It's like I'm still inside of it. I'm still at the control, but man, it makes me so much faster and stronger than I used to be. It's just been an incredible force multiplier.
That's also a good analogy. It is that Iron Man suit. And then with putting a layperson in that Iron Man suit is one thing. Putting a professional fighter or someone who's trained with that Iron Man suit is even better. So I think software engineering, we can both agree then that really the discipline of software engineering is not going away. And this is yet another huge power tool that is now at our disposal.
It's not going away, but I do think it's going to change a lot. And if we were interviewing general contractors and one of them showed up and said, I'm a purist, I'm a craftsman, I'm going to renovate your kitchen, but I'm only going to use hand tools to do that, I'd be like, oh, that's fantastic that you have a hobby. I'm looking for a professional and I want to get this done cheaply and efficiently and well. You're an artist. That's great. Go play in your workshop. We need a kitchen built. I'm 45 years old. I do see amongst a bunch of my peers who've been coding one way their whole life a resistance to these tools and Man, the nuance is so important because it is right to buck against the hype. They will sometimes do incredibly stupid things. They cannot automate away the job, but you can't just wave your hands and say, okay, we're not going to use them. So much of my last 2 years has been, again, trying to get my hands dirty with them as much as possible. And I would encourage any professional in whatever field you're in to do the same. Figure out what are the tasks you're doing on a day-to-day basis and open up ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your tool of choice is, and to see if it can help you do that. Because ultimately, the only real answer for these tools, the only meaningful answer is not are they useful or whatnot, is are they useful to you? And that's going to vary so much on a case-by-case basis based on your company, your needs, your processes, et cetera.
If today's conversation showed you the possibilities of AI in software development, whether that's increasing productivity, building smarter prototypes, or scaling reliable applications, Impekable can help you take the next step. As a trusted partner to Twilio, Google Cloud, 11 Labs, and other leading platforms, we specialize in turning concepts into products that last. Head to impekable.com or check the link in the description to connect with us and start building what's next.
This is a great segue. We've covered the topic sufficiently that AI is, for at least software developers, really a great productivity power tool. Transitioning into that, give us the lowdown. There's everything from one end of the spectrum is lovable, and then on the other is Windsurf, Cursor, Claude Code, which are more developer centric, and then the other side is for non-developers who can just vibe code. What is your take on lay of the land, and what is your recommendation in terms of tools of choice, and when would you use one or the other?
That's a great question. The place I would start is looking at, if you're already using ChatGPT or Claude, in ChatGPT, and for transparency, I do some contract work with Anthropic because my LLM of choice was Claude, so I'll often speak more about Claude. But I know ChatGPT is a more popular one, especially the consumer audience, whereas Claude tends to be a little bit more popular amongst like the enterprise or business and commercial audience. But ChatGPT has a product called Canvas, where it can write some code and run the code there in the app. Claude has theirs called Artifacts. You can say, build me a mini app that does X, Y, and Z. And it would be like a single page app. My daughter, for instance, wanted to build, she likes making crepes. We had Claude do deep research on crepe recipes. It looked up like 100 crepe recipes. We want to do sourdough crepes. We had it construct the perfect sourdough crepe recipe from there. And we had it build an app. And this app's sole purpose was to be a to-do list for that one recipe. It's an app for a single recipe for a single person. Nobody else will ever use it, and she'll never use it for a different recipe. So this is a perfect example of software that fundamentally would not exist if it were not for AI. And that's a really great place for you to make a natural transition if you're already using the tools a little bit, because that gives you a taste of the power of having AI build code for you. From there, Lovable is great for building standalone applications, build stuff a little bit meatier, like a standalone website. To be fair, I played with it a little bit, but not a lot. I'm not an expert there because I am a developer. I like getting my hands a little dirtier. As a developer, if I could say that the general transition over the last 2 years has been, first, we had GitHub Copilot, which was an addition to our, what we call an IDE or our text editor where we write the code. It was fancy autocomplete for code. You'd be writing some code and it would make a suggestion of like, I think you want this line. And you could hit tab if you wanted it to autocomplete that line for you. But that's all it was doing, giving you 1 or 3 or 4 lines of code tops. You were still fundamentally writing code the same way we've been doing my whole life, which is in a text editor. Then Cursor came out, one of the fastest companies ever to $100 million in revenue. It's one of the most powerful developer tools that I've ever seen. It's the most quickly adopted developer tool ever. And this was a text editor that had ChatGPT baked into it. So no longer were you tabbing back and forth between your text editor and a browser and copying and pasting code from ChatGPT into your editor. It was just right there. And that alone gave a lot of productivity boosts because you weren't getting distracted when you went out to the web. You weren't having to context switch. Also, because it was built into the editor, it could read the files that were there on your machine and use those as context. So you didn't have to like copy paste them in. It also would integrate with the terminal. So you could run your code. And then if you got an error message, you could copy paste that there and it'd be like, oh, look at line 66. And it could look at line 66, make the suggestion, and go from there. And I think for like a year, Cursor was kind of like the awesome model of, hey, let's just bring the intelligence closer to the tool where the developer already works. And the big change over the last 6 months or so has been when Claude Code came out. And this is a new paradigm, which is like an autonomous agent, semi-autonomous agent. You're still giving it directions. It runs in the terminal. So it's not a standalone app. It's like you open up a terminal or command line and you run Claude. It has access to all the files in the directory and it has a little chat interface. You tell it, hey, I want you to build this or I want you to add this feature. And it does all the stuff and you watch it go. I increasingly am using Claude and not even touching a text editor. And that's been a really fascinating for me of how much I can do. And to me, it feels like this next level of abstraction. When I got started programming, I was doing C++, and then I moved to Pascal and Ruby and PHP. With Ruby on Rails, this is a web framework where there's just a lot of things I don't have to think about. I could think level up from managing memory that you have to do in C++. And this feels a similar progression of now there's this new level of abstraction where I can talk about architecture, but I don't have to talk about the specific implementation details that I would have had to do in the past. Or I might say, integrate this API, but instead of having to write the integration myself, I can copy paste a link to the docs for it to Claude and it writes all the integrations for me. I just have to be specific about which API and point it at the docs. That's kind of the transition I personally have seen. Again, it just depends on how much of a professional software development environment are you working in and how much do you need to depend on the reliability of the software that you're producing.
That's a great segue into software development best practices. And in this new AI world, how would you translate that? When we talk about software development, we talk about test-driven development, writing the unit tests, having it pass the test, and then writing code until it passes first, getting all those things right, and then you're doing automated CI/CD, all that good stuff. How does that translate in that when you prompt a whole app, none of that good stuff comes with it necessarily. So please enlighten us. There's a good segue into how do we leverage AI, but still have all these good practices?
You can see my screen, right? Okay. Like I said, I'm playing in a fantasy football league with a bunch of former colleagues, and we are all using a large language model to make the decisions for our team. I also have found that taking the best practices from software development and using with an AI agent makes a world of difference here. I manage my project not from the agent and the terminal, but from GitHub. This is what's called an MCP server. It helps me get data to my large language models so I can make decisions about my team. So let's add something new here. I'm going to say add the news tool. In the Fantasy Football Nerd API, there is a news endpoint. Please add a new MCP tool to our MCP server to pull down all of that news and return it nicely formatted.
What is this tool you're using?
So that tool I use is called Super Whisper. It's a dictation device. It uses the Whisper AI model to do voice to text, and then it passes the transcript through either Claude or whatever your LLM of choice is to like clean up the text a little bit. But I found myself increasingly dictating instructions to the agent. I'm going to create this issue. It doesn't matter if you have a human developer or an AI developer working. This is a similar process. Also doesn't matter your tool. I'm using GitHub here. People might use Jira or Atlassian, but I'm going to use GitHub to create a new ticket. Now I'm going to go into my agent, which is Claude. I'll make this bigger. I'm going to run Claude, and I have what's called a command set up so that you all can see the instructions that are going to happen here. I have this prompt, and it's called issue. I'm telling Claude that when I run this command, use a subagent to plan the implementation, create a new branch for the issue, solve the issue in small manageable steps, then run the tests. Also, like write new tests for any work that we did, and then open a pull request, do a review of the pull request.
Basically spoon feeding your SOP for good software development.
Exactly. That was called issue 50. Here, I'm going to do /issue. And so now Claude is going to follow that process. It's going to first use the GitHub CLI to go download that issue. It's going to investigate it. It's going to come up with a plan. In order to come up with that plan, it's going to look at all the past pull requests that have been closed to see what recent work has been done and see if it can find any work that is related to this issue. It's also going to look at the code base and try to figure out what files it might need to edit in order to do this work. Here it's found sleeper MCP. That's the main file here that drives this MCP server. Then once it's come up with a plan, it will start executing on the plan. My guess is this process will take like 5 minutes or so. It may or may not make sense to sit here and navigate and narrate the whole thing. But it will figure it out. And once it's done, it does all the work for that on a different GitHub branch. So it's not editing the files directly. It's making a copy of the code base, making changes to the copy. And then in GitHub, it creates what's called a pull request, which is asking me to review its changes. And I can merge those changes in with the official version of the code base, and we can deploy that.
Right. If it passes your approval.
If it passes my approval, correct. And I've also experimented to do the code review, like a fresh version to get fresh eyes on it. But I typically will go through and review it and make sure that everything looks good to me. But to your point about test-driven development, I just want to be really clear. I think everybody here, Claude Code's 6 months old. Everyone's really experimenting, trying to figure out what the new processes are. And there's not a good answer for every project, but tests are one way that I get a lot more confidence that it's not going to break stuff. And that it raises a really important issue about large language models and code, because everybody's concerned about hallucinations with LLMs lie to you. Code has a really nice quality in that you can run it, or you can write tests against it and see if it works. So to some extent, hallucinations are much less of an issue in code than in prose, because there's an actual validity check. There's a few other properties of code that make it really well tailored for LLMs. Like you can get really specific training sets of just code. GitHub exists with all this publicly available code. It's well structured and logical. There's often clear right or clear wrong answers. And there's this validity check. That's why we're seeing an explosion of adoption and utility for LLMs in the software development world. Whereas like other fields that don't have that validity check, say like in a newsroom, for instance, it's a lot harder to run some code and say, is there a factual inaccuracy in this paragraph?
You generate stuff that doesn't work and it breaks. Right? That's
If
very
it breaks,
simple.
we can tell that it breaks and go from there. It looks like it just did. Let me run the test script. There was an error. It's thinking, it goes, I see the issue. When using the MCP tool decorator, let me fix that test script. So this is a great example. You can see here, it wrote some code, wrote it to the file, and then it said, let me write a simple test script to verify that it works. It ran that script. It threw an error. Then it said, okay, I see the issue. Then it went back. Now it's updating the code that it wrote. It looks like it ran it again, or it's updating something else. Now it's testing it again. It will just keep iterating through that loop of run it, see if it works until it's done. Once it's done, it will give that back to me. I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll see what happens when it's all done. But this is to sort of answer your question. I've actually found for myself, I'd say the first year and a half of this journey I've been on, I thought of myself as a developer who was augmenting with AI tools. For the last 6 months, have started thinking of myself more as an engineering manager who is managing a team of 1 to 4 AI software developers at a time. And that mind shift has unlocked a lot more productivity gains for me. I think now more as a manager delegating work to an AI, but needing the systems in place that we don't have to invent from scratch. We have systems to manage the software development lifecycle amongst a distributed team of developers. I'm starting to swap in AI agents for those developers.
You said what I was going to summarize or conclude, that it now feels like instead of the old world, you might be that senior manager overseeing a project where you're creating tickets to mid or junior developers to do. And then in this new AI world, you're still doing that, but those developers are not junior developer people, they're AI agents. And with Claude, you can have multiple agents running parallel. You can have that notion of as many agents create tons of tickets. And then instead of you personally having to go do them individually, you have agents running in the background trying to get all those work done in parallel.
In theory, yes. In practice, it turns out so much software is built sequentially. So often the next step is dependent upon the step right before it, unless you're working on a very large legacy code base that has parts of the code base that are siloed from one another, or like something where you have a bunch of microservices. But in theory, yes, I have absolutely run Claude to do some documentation tasks while it was also implementing a new feature. Or a common one would be like, hey, go identify opportunities for refactoring or eliminating technical debt here and write an audit. But yes, in theory, and a lot of folks have been experimenting with this, like how do you run these in parallel? There's still enough times when it screws up that I think it's important to be able to fully harness this, that you need to be capable of looking into the code, seeing what it's done, because sometimes it makes mistakes that are silly, but it's also always getting better. So everything that I say right now may be obsolete in like 6 months or 12 months. Maybe we'll all be unemployed in 12 months. I don't know. But as of right now, this is far more exciting to me as a software developer than it is daunting.
Absolutely. It goes back to also having that specialization expertise, because the AI can run loops trying to correct the errors I won't name shame particular tools, but they generate code. This one time I was working on this app and kept breaking. And I finally just looked at the code and, oh, it's this simple thing. But it was trying to fix it like 3, 4 times
Yeah.
until I got frustrated. And let me look at what's actually breaking. Okay, as a developer, it's this problem and I fixed it and I got it done. But it needs that subject matter expert who knows, if you know about cars and you got an AI that doesn't know too much and then it keeps trying to fix it and then you're the expert and you look at the problem, okay, this thing is wrong, done.
I had an example like that using Replit, which is, I think all these tools exist on a continuum from how much do you see the code and interact with the code. And Replit is like, you see the code more than you do in Lovable, but they're really pushing their agents where you can build stuff without looking at the code at all. And I had to build a chatbot or something. At the time I was using ChatGPT 4 or 5 was the state-of-the-art model from OpenAI. And it built this chatbot and the interface of me. I'm like so blown. Oh my God, this is so incredible. But it was using ChatGPT 4. No, I was using 3.5, which is really old, not very good one. It's like, that's fine. I just need you to change that GPT 3.5 to 4.5. So I would tell it to do it in the chat, and it could not change it. Like it could not. I finally then went in and figured out how to turn on code editing because they disable it in the beginning. And I went in and I just highlight, like literally change the 3 to a 4. It worked great. And then I asked it to deploy a new feature, like build a new feature. And in the process of building that new feature, it went back and changed the 4 to a 3. And so built the new feature, but now with the bad AI again. And there was nothing I could do in the conversation to get it to change a single character. And it was like, I needed a scalpel. And instead, all I had was a microphone to somebody who's holding an axe, right? And I'm like, no, let me go in there and do it myself. And so those are the sort of things where I just think that if it's so exciting, and anyone who's into this, I don't want to discourage you in any way, because building software is the most empowering thing I've really done in my life. It really feels like superpowers. If you're inclined, go do it. But there will be spots where you get really frustrated. And if you don't have some degree of familiarity with the code, you're going to bump up against some rough edges. Now, I'll also say this is possible that this is one of the best ways to learn how to code, because if you can build something you care about and you can go inspect, okay, what is happening? What's going on here? That's just a fantastic way to learn this stuff.
That's a great way to conclude. I echo that. I never touch a line of Python code my life. I worked in other programming languages, and with the advent of AI code generation, I was able to write Python code and not knowing what, I just write something and having AI correct that and kind of format it right way. That was a way to teach me to learn how to do coding in Python. With that, thank you so much. We've learned so much about this. I've gotten great insights. For those of you who enjoyed this talk and want to follow more of Greg, he's got a YouTube channel, which we'll link, and a website. And we are very excited to see new developments with who you're working for, Claude, and new developments there. So I'll keep the folks updated and posted on the comments and descriptions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg.
Quick break. If Greg's take on AI as the new power tool for developers has you thinking about how your team could ship faster, that's where Impekable comes in. We help companies design, build, and launch software that's not just a flashy demo, but production-ready. From AI-powered proof of concepts to scalable cloud applications, we've worked with Twilio, Google Cloud, and 11 Labs to help their customers turn ideas into reality. Visit impekable.com to see how we can help you build smarter and ship faster.